Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. This show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we will give you the real deal, not the bias or spin of the major media's politically correct or censored opinions that masquerade as facts. When we provide you opinions, you will know it. This show rejects politically correct uniformity. That disease is a terminal threat for our democracy and for our freedoms. The election of 2020 goes on. It appears there will be a challenge to overcome the ballot fraud around the country. I will say this, I know and respect Sidney Powell as a terrific attorney, not known for bluster, so we will see. Meantime, let's give credit to President Trump for his efforts to achieve rapid vaccination development. Operation Warp Speed appears to be successful. And as for Joe Biden, I'm sure we'll hope he builds on the successes of the Trump administration, particularly in foreign policy in the Middle East. Now for this week's show. This week's guest is Dinesh D'Souza, and it's a great honor and privilege to have him here. I first read Dinesh's book about education and politically correctness on the campus in 1991, when Dinesh was probably just a young man, but I'd already been around and a lawyer for a long time, and I've followed his career ever since then. And he is not only a brilliant intellect, but he is a great writer and an innovator. He has created an art form of political documentaries, and I believe, Dinesh, you have 4 or 5 of the top 10 all-time political documentaries in terms of box office in history, which is an incredible accomplishment, especially for conservatives. And the films were 2016 Obama's America, Imagine a World Without Her, which I think I saw in theater because there was a lot of promotion there to see it in the theaters to help box office. Hillary's America, Death of a Nation, and his latest, which we'll be talking about today, Trump Card. Very exciting work that you do. Dinesh also has a new best-selling book out called The United States of Socialism, a little bit prophetic also because the Democrats have moved in that direction, that book coming out just a few months ago. I first met Dinesh's work in National Review a long time ago, Dinesh, because I've been subscribing to National Review since I was in high school, and I graduated in 1968, so that tells you how old I am. And so, most important of all, Dinesh D'Souza, when he had the opportunity, moved to Texas, which I think is all the credit to you. So Dinesh, I'm excited to have you here. It's an honor and a privilege, and before we get into the interview, I'm going to play this clip from Trump Card.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of rain.
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
We are in a cold civil war. I see a threat to the very reason I came to America.
America was never great! America was never great!
Are we losing our country?
We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression.
Are we becoming the United States of socialism? Who's behind it?
Our country should be more fearful of white man.
They control the black community, they control the black vote.
The president spoke tonight as if
they don't want to hear the truth, the media, and I almost feel like they gloat when there's a mass shooting.
My hands are being put in handcuffs, my ankles are shacked.
Period of 18 months, I went through 23 different audits or investigations.
29 FBI agents with assault weapons.
Why it's evil.
Joe Biden offshored the corruption. He has become incredibly soft in his criticism of China.
Growth in China is overwhelmingly in our interest.
It is directly linked to the fact that his son was doing multiple deals with the Chinese government.
What is the fundamentalist and jihadi agenda for America?
The future of America has to be Muslim.
What you're saying is that there is serious Middle Eastern and specifically radical Islamic intervention into U.S. politics.
Exactly, and I think it's more dangerous than the so-called Russian collusion.
They want to beat us into submission.
And before I could even catch my footing, then all the hits kept coming.
They want to make us into worms.
How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?
4.
Who will stop them?
That America will never be a socialist country.
All right, we've seen the Trump card clip. The documentary, the artistic work is terrific. The message is, of course, I love. And tell us about why you decided to make Trump card.
Well, socialism is an idea that appeared to be discredited at the end of the 20th century. It was tried in 25 countries. Almost half the real estate on the planet was under some form of socialism. I grew up in India under socialism. Kind of interesting, people on the left will say today, you know, Dinesh, we don't support authoritarian socialism. We like democratic socialism. Well, that's not a new idea either. India had democratic socialism. And for me, it was epitomized by scarcity. We had a ration card, my family did. So the bottom line of it is that India was the begging bowl of the world, and socialism was a big part of the reason for that. So in this movie, I take that big theme, socialism, and I ask, how did this crazy, whacked out idea that failed everywhere, how did it migrate to the mainstream of American politics in the 21st century? And how did it get to the sort of bloodstream of the Democratic Party? And then if it can be stopped, is Trump or Trumpism the remedy for socialism?
Okay. And of course, the movie is out and available. You can get it on Amazon, right? In fact, when I went on...
Apple iTunes, Amazon Prime, Google, YouTube, all the different platforms. And it's kind of fun to watch it on a big screen TV because I made it for the theater, for the big screen. So you can watch it on any device, but it's more fun if you watch it on a big screen TV.
So why did you decide years ago, a number of years ago now, to become a filmmaker as well as a writer?
It occurred to me that books have a limited audience, and that the audience is people who, in a sense, operate sort of through argument, through the mind. But a movie is an emotional narrative. It's really a story, and a good nonfiction movie has all the same ingredients as a good fiction movie. That's character, that's suspense, it moves you, it's inspiring. In parts, it may be a horror film, scares you a little bit. And our movies have all of that. And so I realized that a film enables you to reach several million people, which is quite different from a book, which, you know, even if your book's a big bestseller, you're going to reach 100, maybe 200,000 people at the outset. It's completely different than the several million people who see a movie.
And have you found, now that you've done a number of films, it gets easier to make, or does it get harder?
Well, the films are harder to make on the conservative side. If you're Michael Moore, you just walk into a studio, they give you $10 million, you make a movie. The next day you're booked on The View and The Today Show and Bill Maher on HBO. With us, we have to do the legal work, we have to raise the money, we have to make the movie, and then we have to market it. So it's all these disparate skills which don't always go together. So we've got a small film team, about 10 of us, and we've kind of perfected this, so we're able to pull it off. So yes, we are better at it than we were before. And if you look at our movies, the later ones, you'll see a cinematic quality that is, I think, much stronger than you would see in the earlier films.
Do you get support from conservative organizations, let's say Republican parties, that invite you to come in to screen your film, or to offer your film as a premium if people come to an event and hear you speak? Is that one way that you market?
Well, one way we've marketed in the past is you've got these Republican women's groups scattered throughout the country, and many times they would, do a buyout, a theatrical buyout, invite all their members to come, so it would fill the theater, they'd all be able to watch it together, there's a lot of camaraderie. Now, this year's been strange because of COVID. I was very disappointed the movie couldn't be in theaters, so we've released it really to home box office so people can watch at home. So this has been an unusual year, but at the same time, it's kind of nice that you get the movie right at home and you can watch it. Ironically, with the election still kind of hanging on, the movie remains intensely relevant. And all the major themes we talk about, the deep state, the media, Biden corruption, voter fraud, it's all right there in the movie.
Well, It's a terrific film, and I certainly recommend people view it if they care about the country. Before we move off the film, I had a couple of questions about, you're living in Texas. Did you make the films in Texas?
Well, yes and no. We do shooting all over the place depending on what we're shooting. But yes, we predominantly shot this one in Texas. Texas, fortunately, has a pretty good film industry, particularly in Dallas. Very good actors. Our Abraham Lincoln kid comes from Oklahoma, so we had to import him. But we got a terrific. He looks exactly like Lincoln, and he has all that gravitas and dignity. So we were lucky to find him, and we had to bring him in.
Do you find you can find the kind of technical crews and help you need to make a film in Texas too?
Absolutely. I mean, the cinematographer we have is on our team, and he comes from California, but he has a whole sort of supporting cast of characters who man all the different cameras. We shoot with multiple cameras, and so you have sound guys and all gaffers and all kinds of characters, and so we build the team in the venue that we're shooting.
Do you think that there's any good reason why more films like yours are not made in Texas?
Well, they should be. Texas has some incentives for films, and it's a good place to make movies. It also enables you to gain a certain independence from Hollywood. You're not captive to the Hollywood culture, which is very small and very incestuous and very intolerant. So for someone like me, it's a relief not to be in that environment, because I would be among people that I intensely dislike.
Well, that's because you're not a closet. You know, there are a lot of closeted conservatives in Hollywood. As you probably know, in Texas, you don't have to be closeted. You can be proud of your position and not worry about getting blackballed, which was what happens in Hollywood.
When I first made a liberal education, we did a showing in California for a conservative group called the Friends of Abe. And, at that time, of course, I was a college president. I had never made a movie. And after the movie was over, one of the Hollywood guys jumped up and he goes, this is ridiculous. Why did this guy Dinesh make this movie? He doesn't know anything about movies, but why don't one of us? This whole room is full of screenwriters and actors and musicians. Why didn't any of us make the movie? And see, I can answer that question. It's because those guys are beholden to Hollywood. They need jobs from the studios. And so in a sense, Hollywood has a hold on them, which it doesn't have on me. That's why I was the guy who ended up making the movie.
Well, thank goodness for it. So Dinesh, let's talk about the election, the 2020 election, not over yet. It appears that even though at this point Donald Trump is not going to get reelected, but who knows, he had coattails that Joe Biden, who is getting elected, had none. What's going on here?
Well, the election, to anyone who looks at it with any degree of distance or objectivity, will see that it makes no sense. Because normally the president, as you say, carries with him coattails of Republicans who are not as well known as he is and are sort of riding on the president. And this was, by the way, confirmed by the election day results. If you look at a state like Pennsylvania, Trump himself was running ahead of the Republicans by about 7 points. Then miraculously, when they stopped the counting and they all went home, they came back and they found new votes. Suddenly, the other Republicans were doing just fine. They were maintaining their pattern, but Trump and Trump alone takes a nosedive. So this, to any statistician, anyone who's in artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, they're going to look at this and go, something here is very fishy. So that's the point, is can we go from all this data that looks so anomalous and suspect to something resembling legal proof? And I think that remains an unanswered question.
Well, yeah, it is, but it's just, I've read, as you have, all the different statistics, all the numbers, the commonality, the battleground state, major Democratic cities all shut down about the same time. All of them was where Trump had sizable leads, and then they start up again, and then all of a sudden 100,000, 50,000 votes come in for Biden, and Trump gets zero, and they only voted for Biden? I mean, it makes zero sense. I mean, I think the suggestion is what happened was they had to stop the count because they had to figure out how many votes they had to steal.
This is an excellent point. I mean, when we look back, it's almost as if the Republicans were focused on managing the campaign, which is rallies and television ads and this and that. And the Democrats, who didn't bother to campaign hardly at all, were focused on the actual election itself. So the Democrats were filing lawsuits that would essentially enable this widespread mail-in balloting. They regulated the process of counting and made sure the Republicans were all a very safe distance away so that they couldn't observe any shenanigans. So it's almost like the Republicans focused on the campaign and the Democrats focused on the election.
And some of the Republicans, like in Georgia, the governor and secretary of state apparently didn't even realize what agreements they were entering into and the political implications for it with Stacey Abrams, the once and future governor of Georgia. I don't know why some of our people are just not too sophisticated, taken to the cleaners.
Well, even the Trump people, I think, looking back, Trump was saying long before the election that this is a big problem. The mail-in ballots are a problem. The legal stuff is a problem. And you can tell the Democrats were on it. When they were interviewing Amy Coney Barrett in the hearings, they were very emphatic. Will you recuse yourself from any election-oriented case? You could tell that they had thought about this and they were planning for it. Whereas the Trump guys, and this is a Republican problem, I think generally, is that they will voice public concerns about a problem, but why weren't you filing lawsuits? Why didn't you have hundreds, if not thousands, of poll watchers everywhere? Why didn't you raise a ruckus from the very beginning? It's very difficult to track these problems down later. So I think in retrospect, there are some sobering lessons to be learned from all this, no matter how it turns out.
Well, it's certainly true that if the Republicans don't get their act together in terms of ballot security, if we don't tighten our election laws so we end the ballot by mail fraud that can take place so easily, we're not going to win any major elections ever again if they get away with it all the time.
Well, the problem with this is that it actually destroys not only the idea of legitimate elections, it destroys the idea of democracy, and to some degree it destroys the idea that we even have a country, because the whole notion of a multi-party democracy, the idea of competitive election, is, listen, losing an election is not like losing a war, and that if you lose, you should hang in there and you should continue to be engaged because you could win the next time. So if you remove the expectation and hope that the losing party on one occasion can ever win again, then ultimately one part of the population feels that they are captive to the other part of the country. And that is a very volatile recipe for civil strife and chaos.
Yeah, and especially that's one of the reasons the gun purchases have gone through the roof, because people don't trust that. All right, well, Dinesh, we got to pay a few bills, so we will be back after these messages with Dinesh D'Souza on Tell It Like It Is.
During the Cadillac Season's Best Sales event, Ron Carter Cadillac, Houston's only Cadillac to-your-door dealer, delivers 0% APR for 72 months, plus $3,000 bonus cash on both the first-ever 2020 CT4 Luxury Collection for only $449 a month, and the first-ever 2020 CT5 Luxury Collection for just $499 a month, both with only $1 down. Gulf Freeway, just 2 minutes south of the Beltway.
Shop smarter when you shop Ron Carter. Ron Carter, Cadillac.com.
I'm attorney Willie Powells. Allow me to express myself with you. If you've been hurt or injured in a car or truck accident, give me a call and we'll get it fixed today.
Season's best sales event, Ron Carter Cadillac delivers 0% APR for 72 months, plus $2,500 bonus cash on all 2020 XT4, XT5, and XT6. Or drive 2020 XT4 Luxury Collection, only $299 a month. 2020 XT5 Premium Luxury Collection, just $369 a month. And first ever 2020 XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, just $399 a month. All for 39-month lease with just $1 down.
Ron Carter, Cadillac.com.
Have you been injured in an 18-wheeler accident, truck accident, car accident? Was someone texting and ran into the back of you, not paying attention? It doesn't matter what it is. Give me a call, attorney Willie Powells. We'll fix it today. The number is 281-881-2457. Again, that number is 281-881-2457. We'll fix it today. Call attorney Willie Powells.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. We're going to continue our interview with our distinguished guest, Dinesh D'Souza, author, playwright, filmmaker, and intellectual. Dinesh? You fall asleep during the break, you're okay. All right.
I'm right here, wide awake.
So we talked at the break, and here's an interesting questions I've had talking to various sophisticated citizens. Let's say everything that the Trump legal team says is true. This election was stolen. What kind of future does well, number one, how do we undo everything in the next 2 to 3 weeks that we have for the 37 days allegedly that's available? And then what are the implications going forward for the country?
Well, if the election was in fact stolen, it had to be done in a somewhat coordinated way. And that means we have one of the two major political parties that is officially cheating on a cosmic scale in a national presidential election. I think this would have serious implications for the Democratic Party going forward, and for the media, which has been complicit and covering up, you may say, the crimes of the Democratic Party. I think that courts could order a signature match recount in the key states. I don't think this would fully fix the problem because quite likely there was cheating in the non-swing states also. But you have to focus on what can be done in the time that is available. Look, there actually is time to do these things that need to be done. Even in Georgia, for example, where they did this sort of silly recount, which I say is silly because it's kind of like accusing a bank of having counterfeit money. And the bank goes, listen, we'll recount all the bills without bothering to tell the difference between the real money and the counterfeit money. And here we go. Same total as we got last time.
Yeah, how do you like that?
Things are good. So this is like banking for idiots, right? So similarly here, for suckers, they can go, oh, wow. But see, I think what's sad about all this is that the Democrats, if they were really wanted to establish the legitimacy of Biden's victory, they would be in front of the call for doing this. They'd be like, listen, it's kind of like if you were to tell, LeBron James, listen, you're a lousy basketball player because every time you go for the net, the hoop drops, 6 inches. You'd be like, what, are you kidding? Come and take a look for yourself. It is in his interest to establish the legitimacy of his excellence. But Biden is deadly quiet about all this, and the Democrats are deadly quiet about it in the media. It's kind of like, let's move on, guys. Nothing to see here. It's almost as if they kind of know they cheated, but they feel like it was justified in this case, and they just want us to now accept the result, even though I think they know deep down we're not going to.
And without actually doing what you have suggested, the Democrats are left with a president who basically got 50.5% of the vote and lost 49.5%, and those who lost are going to believe that the election was stolen improperly. So how does that give? I don't believe that gives Biden any kind of mandate for anything.
Not at all. And the Republicans are going to be very angry and be doing block and tackle for 2 years. And then obviously they will make a supreme effort to take both houses of Congress in the midterm, after which I don't think it would be out of the question to impeach Biden, because that's exactly what the Democrats did when they had a House majority. They did that to Trump. There's no reason we shouldn't do it to Biden, and it's not as if we don't have cause.
Yeah, especially if more information comes out that him and his team were complicit in stealing votes. What about the allegations that there were computer logarithms that also manipulated the vote, and it was just a data entry? You think that has any substance?
Well, my wife is from Venezuela, and she's got a pretty deep understanding of what has happened over there. And in Venezuela, there is actually no cheating at the voting level, because once you vote, they put an indelible mark on your finger that shows you voted. So you actually can't vote multiple times. Dead people can't show up and vote. But there's cheating at the level of vote counting by the programming of the machines. Well, it turns out that the machines are Dominion. They're Smartmatic. They're the exact same machines that are now being used in swing states here. So the bottom line of it is, but one thing Debbie does say is she says that the programming of the machines is so cunning that the algorithms keep changing. And so it's very difficult to be able to prove this. Even though the machines might be rigged, it might be difficult to be able to make a case in which you're able to establish that they were in fact rigged.
Well, if that's the kind of voting machines we have and all logarithms are using, I think we've had our last free national election. Not this time, previously, that it's gone. That's really scary.
It's really scary, and I don't think people will, put up with it. So, ironically, for election reform, probably in order to overturn the result of an election, you have to prove that the machines were rigged and votes were swapped. But I think for election reform, you merely have to show that the machines could be rigged. Because imagine if you go to any sort of roulette machine and it's rigged. So they tell you there's a 1 in 100 chance that you get number 49, but in fact, that's not the case. Well, obviously, you're dealing with a rigged game from the outset, and this is very bad for a first world country. It's very bad for a country that pretends to be a democracy. It sinks your faith. I mean, we already have very low faith in the deep state, no faith in the media. This will now collapse our faith in democracy itself. So I think the implications of it are very problematic.
They're profound. And this problem with the ballot stealing, picking up ballots, dead people voting, attempt to have massive ballot by mail, that was going on in Harris County in Houston, as you know. I'm sure you followed that. We had the interim county clerk who wanted to mail and printed 2.4 million ballots, to ballot by mail to everybody, whether they're live, dead, moved, requested them or not, and it was stopped by the Attorney General Paxton and Governor Abbott. Thank goodness, because otherwise they could have stolen Texas.
Well, Texas very specifically rejected precisely the machines that are now in question, and these machines have a terrible history. Look, they have a history of being rigged in other countries. You have the founders and the devisers of these machines boasting about vote rigging, switching 1 million votes here, 1 million votes there. You have one of the Antifa guys who's apparently one of the architects of one of these machines. He was talking on his Facebook page and stuff about rigging the election against Trump. So you've got all this stuff, and it's pretty close to smoking gun evidence. So this is all, I think, very problematic, and I think it is of supreme importance that it be fixed and fixed now. It's not enough to say let's fix it later, because if you don't fix it now, it's not likely to be fixed later.
In fact, there were some Democratic leaders, senators, I think, who came out in 2019 and were against these machines in the programming they used because they felt it could be manipulated. Now they're quiet.
Yeah, and then add on top of this the history that these democratic cities have of fraud. Chicago, Philadelphia, I mean, notorious cases of people who have tossed in prison all the time for vote rigging, vote buying, all kinds of shenanigans. So the idea that these people are sort of morally above it, they would never dream of doing it. It's funny, the same media that kept talking about Russia collusion. Oh, the Russians fixed the election because the 7 Russians bought a Facebook ad. These same clowns are now like, oh, the system is perfect. There's no possibility of any rigging whatsoever.
Move along, right?
I mean, we're supposed to listen to this from adults and pretend like we're impressed, even though you're listening to it's like this is like a talk in a madhouse.
Exactly. It's almost like we're living in the Twilight Zone. It's so bizarre, and the things make zero sense. But I think, look, the reaction most recently about Fox's News has kind of shift away from conservatives or Trump has had a profound impact on their ratings already. So it looks like at least the conservative audience is going to vote with their feet if they don't like what's going on in the media, in politics, all of it.
There's no question that half the country, in my opinion, is not being served. And I would say in every department, it's not being served in education. It's not being served in colleges. It's not being served in entertainment. It's not being served in comedy. It's not being served in terms of a news channel. So the bottom line of it is it's almost as if conservatives and Republicans need over the next several years, and this is an issue that goes beyond Trump, to create an alternative culture that delivers everything from education to entertainment to children's instruction, that basically creates an alternative culture in America, and we live in it.
Well, and that is a brilliant comment, Dinesh, because if you just do battle on the left's culture, we've already lost those wars. We don't beat the left culture is superior for the left, but we don't have to accept that. I mean, I don't know about you. I can't watch MSNBC. I cannot watch CNN. I just can't watch their commentators because, I mean, they're just always lying. I'm at the point I can't even watch the Sunday talk shows because everyone on TV is a liberal hack who treats Republicans and conservatives one way and Democrats and liberals the other. And you can see it every week. Even my wife, who's conservative but not as conservative as I am, noticed. And so we just stopped watching because you don't care what they think. And that's what's going on, I think, for most people. All right.
And quite apart from the political indoctrination, they're also trying to kind of introduce levels of deviancy and perversion. They're trying to ultimately pollute our conscience and ultimately destroy the innocence of our children. And the worst thing is they want us to subsidize it. I mean, and we do. If we send our kids off to college, we're basically paying a bunch of professors to turn them against the values of their parents. So I think ultimately we've got to realize we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to ultimately live in sort of progressive culture and allow them to intimidate us and indoctrinate us and corrupt us. We just don't want that. So we're going to exit their culture, and that means we're going to create our own.
I said that is spot on. You probably need to write a book about that, or maybe you're working on that now.
Well, you do it in part, not even necessarily by advocating it, but by just doing it. I mean, I'm starting to do it in the movie area. It needs to be done in the area of media and entertainment. I mean, if it were up to me, I'd start a comedy channel for young people, politically incorrect comedy, no holds barred. Let's go for it. You can do this right on the web. So there are 20 different ways in which you can begin to start creating an alternative culture, which would find, I think, very quickly a very large audience and be something for which there is a huge and now pent-up demand.
Yeah, so they don't get stuck having to watch the same old leftist culture being shoved down their throat. That's
exactly.
Great point. Okay, so if Biden becomes president, let's talk about the import of Georgia. The Democrats are urging people to move to Georgia to go vote, even though they don't live there. It sounds like more ballot fraud by the Democrats. And the Republican candidates, they are who they are. That's who came through the process. Do you think the Republicans are taking this election serious enough and be careful with ballot security so they don't get ripped off in Georgia again?
Yeah, I think there will be a heightened scrutiny precisely because of all the issues we've been talking about and others. But I'm worried that if you send out to your own side the message that the election is rigged, it becomes demoralizing to Republicans who might say, well, what's the point of voting then? What's the point of coming out to vote and if my vote doesn't count? So I think it's important that we don't send them. I mean, there's no reason you can't investigate presidential election shenanigans and campaign for the two Georgia candidates at the same time. There's no inconsistency there. There's nothing contradictory in those messages. Yes, we want to stop presidential election fraud. At the same time, we want to make sure we protect our Senate majority.
Which is critical in terms of the next 2 years. And given where if you look at the way that election came down so close, the controversy, the House tightening considerably, the Senate hopefully being marginally Republican, it doesn't sound to me like the Democrats or Biden are going to have a lot of maneuvering room in terms of enacting the leftist agenda. And
even the House majority is so razor thin now that just peeling off a few Democrats, not to mention using other block and tackle techniques, can be very effective in blocking stuff that Nancy Pelosi wants to do. She doesn't quite have the free reign that she had during Trump's first term.
Which is good news for the country. And as we look forward to 2022, again, assuming we can get this ballot fraud problem solved, the Republicans conservatives have a great opportunity to take control of the House and build their majority in the Senate.
This is a very important point because it means that there's no reason to be, there are conservatives who said, oh, we've lost the country, and if we lose this election, all is lost. I don't think we need to take that kind of apocalyptic view because it is true that, look, Biden's going to come in, if we're right about him, he won't know what day it is. They're going to make stupid decisions. People are going to say, is this the ridiculous individual we elected? We're going to wait for a chance to throw him out. In the meantime, we'll send him a very strong message in the midterms. So the bottom line of it is there are lots of recourse that people have when they have sort of buyer's remorse, having decided to purchase this preposterous individual and perhaps to place him in the Oval Office.
Do you see that, assuming the election comes out the way it is, the votes against Trump by independents and even some disaffected Republicans, was that a rejection of Trumpism or a rejection of Donald Trump's personality, or neither?
Well, Trump, I think, did very poorly in the first debate. And what I mean by that is he was irascible, he was intemperate, he was interrupting all the time. Weirdly, Biden came across more statesmanlike. I think that was a tactical mistake of the highest order, because it almost made it seem like Biden was the president and Trump was running to unseat him, whereas this was really Trump's election to lose. I'm afraid that I think that there were suburban housewives who watched that who went, this guy's just a little too much for us. We might want to have a cooling off session and get somebody like Biden in there, even though he may be a mediocrity. It's better to have a quiet mediocrity rather than this sort of guy, bull in a china shop. So I'm just giving a sort of analysis for why I think, look, I mean, I believe there was cheating. I believe there was election rigging. But why was this election even close? I mean, Trump actually had an excellent record, both in foreign policy and on the economy.
He did.
He's a strong leader. He shows he can get things done. There's no reason for this election to even be remotely close.
You're right. Well, Dinesh D'Souza, a great pleasure having you on Tell It Like It Is. We will have you back. Good luck with the book Trump Card. You've told people it's available everywhere. And when is the DVD out for purchase, or is it already available?
The DVD is out now, and the movie is available on demand. And the website is just TrumpCardTheMovie.com. So if you want to see where it's playing, you'll see it's up on YouTube and Google and Vudu and Fandango and a whole bunch of sites, Apple iTunes and Amazon Prime probably being the two biggest ones. But TrumpCardTheMovie.com is the place to watch the trailer, and it's also a place to decide kind of how you want to watch the movie.
And well, we hope we whet viewers' appetites by getting to see that clip that we showed earlier in the show. Dinesh, have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, and you too.
Thank you. Thanks for watching Tell It Like It Is. We'll be back again next week, same time, same place. You can email the show, or me at the show, Gary Polland at AmericanStarTV.com. You can get my bi-weekly newsletter, The Texas Conservative Review, by signing up for free at TexasConservativeReview.com. Remembering the immortal words of President Ronald Reagan, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the final step into 1,000 years of a new dark age. Let's hope and pray that if Biden becomes president, that's not the start of the new dark age. We will see you next week.